My beloved child, pause for a moment. There are conversations that never reach the ears they were truly about, and yet they quietly shape hearts in ways no one expects. This is one of those moments. Stay with these words, because something important is waiting for you. Yesterday, while emotions rose and certainty began to fade, someone who believed they understood everything suddenly found themselves questioning what they thought they knew. It was not a loud moment that changed everything. It was a simple sentence, spoken with honesty instead of force. And those few words echoed far longer than anyone in that room expected. They heard your name carried with unexpected warmth, with quiet respect, with a sincerity that could not be hidden behind pride. The silence that followed was heavier than the conversation itself. There are times when people imagine they can control another person's heart simply by standing closer, speaking louder, or demanding more attention. Yet hearts have always recognized something deeper than volume. They recognize peace. They recognize kindness. They recognize the rare comfort of someone whose presence feels like home. That realization arrived yesterday in a way no one planned. The conversation shifted. Questions became hesitation. Confidence became uncertainty. And somewhere between those moments, someone asked why your name was spoken with such unmistakable admiration. The answer came without hesitation. It was calm. It was genuine. It was impossible to misunderstand. What made those words so powerful was not how dramatic they sounded. It was how naturally they were spoken. Sometimes the greatest truths never arrive wrapped in grand speeches. They appear quietly, almost unnoticed, until everyone realizes they have changed the atmosphere around them. That is exactly what happened. A room filled with assumptions suddenly became a place filled with reflection. No one expected a simple expression of appreciation to reveal so much. Yet once it was spoken, nothing sounded the same afterward. Perhaps you have wondered whether the quiet things you do are ever seen. Perhaps you have questioned whether your patience, your compassion, or your steady way of caring has any lasting meaning. Listen carefully to this part, because it matters more than you realize. The qualities that often go unnoticed in noisy moments become unforgettable when someone is searching for what is real. While others competed for attention, your character became the conversation. While others focused on appearances, someone remembered how safe they felt thinking about you. That difference cannot be manufactured. It grows naturally, one sincere moment at a time. Don't skip, because the next realization changes the entire meaning of what happened yesterday. The disagreement was never truly about winning an argument. Beneath every emotional word was a deeper question that remained unanswered. Why did your presence continue to occupy so much space in someone's thoughts? Why did every comparison somehow lead back to you? Why did simple memories seem impossible to replace? Those questions lingered long after the conversation ended, and no quick response could silence them. The remarkable thing about truth is that it rarely rushes. It waits patiently until every distraction grows quiet enough for people to hear it. Yesterday became one of those rare moments. The noise faded. Defenses lowered. Hidden feelings surfaced without anyone intending them to. What began as an ordinary exchange slowly transformed into something far more revealing. Not because anyone planned it, but because honesty has a way of finding its own path. If this message feels strangely familiar, perhaps it is because your heart already sensed that unseen conversations sometimes carry unseen blessings. You never needed to force your value into anyone's life. Genuine appreciation always reveals itself in its own time. Even when you know nothing about the conversations taking place beyond your view, your influence can still be present in ways you never imagined. That is one of life's quiet mysteries. The most meaningful impressions are often made when no audience is watching. As the evening came to an end, there was no dramatic conclusion, no perfect resolution, and no final answer. Instead, there was something far more significant, a lingering silence filled with reflection. Some questions remained unfinished. Some emotions remained unspoken. Yet one realization refused to disappear. Your name now carried a different meaning than it had before that conversation began. And as the night settled into stillness, someone walked away carrying thoughts they could no longer ignore. But what happened after everyone believed the conversation was over, that is where the story truly begins. A quiet morning can reveal more than the loudest night ever could. Long after the voices had faded and everyone returned to their routines, something unusual remained. It was not another argument. It was not another attempt to explain what had happened. It was a single thought that refused to leave his mind. He replayed the conversation again and again, not because he enjoyed the tension, but because one sentence kept standing out above everything else. It was the moment he spoke about you without hesitation, without pretending, and without realizing how much his own words would expose what had been growing inside him all along. The person who had challenged him the day before expected certainty to disappear once emotion settled. Instead, the opposite happened. The more silence surrounded him, the clearer his heart became. Strange, isn't it? Sometimes people only understand the depth of their own feelings after someone else questions them. What was spoken so naturally yesterday suddenly became impossible to ignore today. Every memory connected itself like pieces of a picture that had been incomplete for far too long. Stay till the end, because the next realization carries a quiet kind of strength. He remembered small moments that most people would have forgotten. A conversation that made him smile long after it ended. A kind word that arrived exactly when he needed encouragement. The calm you seemed to bring into situations that once felt confusing. None of these memories demanded attention when they first happened. Yet together they formed something undeniable. They reminded him that genuine connection is built through countless simple moments rather than one dramatic event. Meanwhile, the person who had confronted him yesterday began noticing something unexpected. Every attempt to change the subject somehow circled back to you. Every explanation only revealed another reason your name mattered. It was never planned. It simply happened because authenticity cannot be hidden forever. The harder someone tried to dismiss what they heard, the more obvious it became that those feelings were rooted in something sincere rather than temporary emotion. Perhaps you have experienced seasons when nothing seemed to move forward. Days when silence felt longer than answers. Moments when you questioned whether anyone truly understood the value you carried within. Yet while you were living your ordinary life, unseen reflections were quietly taking place elsewhere. Sometimes hearts do their deepest work in private, away from every audience. What appears like distance on the outside can become remarkable clarity on the inside. There is something beautiful about people discovering truth for themselves. No one can force that process. It arrives gently, often after every distraction loses its hold. Yesterday's disagreement became today's reflection. Today's reflection was already preparing tomorrow's decision. Not because anyone was pressured, but because honest feelings naturally seek honest direction. That quiet movement often changes more than emotional reactions ever could. Don't skip. Because another piece is beginning to fall into place. Later that day, someone asked him a simple question. It sounded ordinary, almost casual, yet it carried unexpected weight. If everything became quiet, if no one else's opinions mattered, who would still be on your mind? He didn't answer immediately. He looked away for a moment, almost surprised by the truth forming inside him. Then, with complete calm, he spoke your name once again. This time there was no argument waiting to interrupt him. There was only certainty, gentle and unmistakable. That answer changed the atmosphere more than anyone expected. No one rushed to respond. No one tried to challenge him again. Sometimes the strongest words are the ones spoken softly because they leave no need for defense. A peaceful truth has a way of settling into every heart that hears it. Even those who disagreed found themselves becoming unusually quiet, as though they had just witnessed something impossible to argue with. Yet even after that moment, one important conversation still had not happened. There was one thought he had not shared. One realization he was still holding close, waiting for the right time. And when those hidden words finally rise to the surface, they will reveal why yesterday's disagreement was only the beginning of a much deeper story. The most meaningful turning points rarely announce themselves. They arrive quietly, almost unnoticed, until someone suddenly realizes they are no longer standing where they once were. That was the feeling surrounding him now. The conversation from yesterday had faded into the background, but its meaning had only grown stronger. Every hour that passed seemed to remove another layer of uncertainty, revealing something that had been present for much longer than anyone had imagined. He found himself reflecting on moments that had once seemed ordinary. A kind exchange that had lifted his spirits on a difficult day. A memory of laughter that returned unexpectedly while he was alone. A sense of calm that always appeared whenever your name entered his thoughts. These were not dramatic memories, yet together they formed a pattern that could no longer be overlooked. Sometimes the heart gathers quiet evidence long before the mind is ready to understand it. Something important is waiting for you, because this next realization changed the direction of everything. As he continued replaying yesterday's words, he recognized that he had never spoken about anyone else with the same warmth. It wasn't planned. It wasn't rehearsed. It simply happened because sincerity has its own voice. That realization surprised even him. It made him pause and ask himself a question he had avoided for far too long. Why does thinking about this person always bring me peace? Questions like that rarely disappear once they have been asked. Instead, they grow gently, asking for honest answers. And honest answers often require courage. Not loud courage that seeks attention, but quiet courage, the kind that allows someone to admit what has been true all along. Meanwhile, the person who had challenged him began noticing something equally unexpected. The disagreement had ended, yet it brought no satisfaction. Instead of feeling victorious, there was only curiosity. Why had his words carried so much conviction? Why had your name remained steady even when emotions were high? The more those questions lingered, the clearer it became that yesterday had revealed something authentic rather than something temporary. Perhaps you have experienced moments when you wondered whether quiet goodness really leaves a lasting impression. In a world that often celebrates the loudest voices, it can be easy to underestimate the strength of consistency, kindness, and sincerity. Yet those very qualities have a remarkable way of staying in someone's heart long after excitement fades. What is genuine does not need to compete. It simply remains. Don't skip, because the next moment unfolded in a way no one expected. Later that evening, another conversation began. This one was calmer. There were no raised voices, no attempts to prove a point. Someone simply asked him, "What was it that made you speak about them with such certainty?" He smiled, not because he had prepared an answer, but because the truth had finally become simple. He explained that some people leave an impression through grand gestures, while others quietly become part of your peace. He said that your presence, even in memory, never felt heavy. It felt reassuring. It reminded him that real connection is not built on constant excitement but on trust, respect, and the feeling that someone brings out the best in you. Those words settled over the room like gentle light after a long evening. No one interrupted him this time. No one tried to redirect the conversation. Sometimes silence is the greatest acknowledgement of all. It was as though everyone understood that something deeper than opinions had just been revealed. Not a dramatic confession, but an honest recognition of what truly mattered. And yet, even after speaking so openly, one thought remained locked inside his heart. It was the one sentence he almost shared, the one he stopped himself from saying at the very last moment. That unfinished sentence would soon become the key to understanding why yesterday's disagreement was never really about the argument itself. It was about a truth that had been quietly growing stronger with every passing day. There are moments when silence speaks more clearly than any conversation ever could. After everything that had been said, after every question had settled into thoughtful quiet, he realized there was still one feeling he had never fully explored. It was not because he was uncertain. It was because some truths feel too meaningful to rush. They deserve a moment of stillness before they are spoken aloud. The following day unfolded like any other, yet something within him had changed. Familiar places looked the same, familiar routines continued, but his perspective was no longer where it had been. He noticed how often your memory appeared without invitation. A passing song reminded him of a conversation. A quiet afternoon brought back a shared laugh. Even the smallest moments seemed connected by an invisible thread that always led back to the same place. Stay till the end, because what happened next revealed something no one had expected. Someone casually mentioned your name again, believing it would simply pass through the conversation. Instead, it brought an unmistakable smile to his face. It was brief, almost impossible to notice unless someone was paying close attention. But it was real. Genuine reactions are difficult to hide, especially when they come from the heart instead of the mind. The person who had disagreed with him the day before noticed that smile immediately. For the first time, there was no impulse to challenge him, no desire to question his feelings. Instead, there was quiet curiosity. It became clear that this was not a passing emotion created by a single conversation. Whatever he felt had been growing quietly for much longer than anyone had realized. Perhaps this is something your own heart needs to remember today. The most meaningful connections are rarely built in dramatic moments. They grow through consistency. Through kindness remembered. Through respect that remains unchanged. Through small acts that leave lasting impressions without asking for recognition. Those are the moments that stay when everything else fades. He then shared something unexpected. He admitted that every time he thought about the future, one image continued to return, not because he forced it to, but because it appeared naturally. It was a future filled with peace, laughter, and honesty. He wasn't describing perfection. He was describing comfort. The kind of comfort that makes a person feel understood without needing to explain every part of themselves. Don't skip, because this next realization quietly transformed everything. As those words settled into the room, someone finally asked, "Then why haven't you said all of this before?" He paused for a long moment. His answer was gentle. "Because I wanted to be certain that what I felt was deeper than emotion. I wanted to know it would remain even after difficult conversations, even after doubts, even after other opinions." The room became still. No one rushed to respond. That answer carried more weight than anyone expected. It revealed that yesterday's disagreement had not weakened his feelings, it had quietly confirmed them. Sometimes challenges do not create distance. Sometimes they reveal which feelings are strong enough to remain when everything else is tested. As the conversation slowly came to an end, everyone believed the most important words had already been spoken. But they were mistaken. Because after everyone else walked away, he stayed behind for just a moment longer, looked toward the empty doorway, and whispered one quiet sentence that no one else was meant to hear. Those words would soon change the meaning of everything that had come before. Not every meaningful sentence is spoken for an audience. Some are whispered into quiet moments, carrying more truth than the loudest declaration ever could. As the room emptied and the evening settled into peaceful silence, he remained where he was for just a little longer. There was no rush. No distraction. Only a calm reflection that seemed to ask him one final question: if no one else were listening, what would you honestly say? He closed his eyes for a brief moment, smiled to himself, and answered with complete sincerity. They have never tried to become someone they're not. The words were simple. Almost ordinary. Yet they carried a depth that surprised even him. He realized that what drew him toward you was not perfection, excitement, or the opinions of others. It was authenticity. In a world where so many people felt the need to impress, you had quietly remained yourself. That quiet confidence had become unforgettable. Something important is waiting for you, because the story did not end with those words. The following morning brought another unexpected moment. A mutual acquaintance mentioned your name while speaking about completely unrelated plans. It should have been a passing reference, nothing more. Yet once again, the atmosphere shifted. Someone laughed softly and said, "You know, every conversation somehow ends up coming back to them." For a second, no one answered. Then he gave a gentle nod. "I suppose that's because some people leave a lasting impression without even realizing it." There was no hesitation in his voice. No need to explain himself. Only quiet certainty. The person who had questioned him before noticed something different this time. The determination to argue had disappeared completely. In its place was thoughtful acceptance. It became easier to understand that admiration cannot be replaced by comparison, nor can genuine respect be erased by temporary misunderstandings. Perhaps this is something your own heart has forgotten. Sometimes you measure your worth by the moments you can see, while life quietly measures it through moments you'll never witness. A kind word remembered years later. A thoughtful gesture recalled at exactly the right time. A peaceful presence that continues to comfort someone long after the conversation has ended. These are the things that quietly shape lives. Don't skip, because the next conversation revealed a truth no one expected to hear. Later that afternoon, someone asked him one final question. If you had the chance to tell them only one thing, what would it be? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked out the window, as though searching for the right words rather than the quickest ones. When he finally spoke, every sentence arrived slowly. I would tell them not to underestimate the difference they've made. I would tell them that kindness is remembered far longer than they believe. And I would tell them that sometimes the greatest gift a person gives isn't something they planned, it's simply the way they make another person feel accepted. Those words settled into every heart that heard them. No one tried to change the subject. No one searched for another opinion. There was only quiet understanding. Yet, as meaningful as those words were, they were still not the deepest truth he was carrying. There remained one memory he had never shared with anyone, a single moment from the past that explained why your name always brought calm into his heart. And when that hidden memory finally comes into the light, every conversation that has unfolded until now will suddenly make perfect sense. Some memories do not ask for attention. They simply wait with quiet patience until the heart is ready to understand why they never disappeared. Days had passed since that unexpected disagreement, yet instead of fading, one particular memory became clearer with each passing hour. It was not the kind of moment anyone would have called extraordinary at the time. In fact, most people would have forgotten it completely. But he never did. He remembered an ordinary conversation when everything around you seemed peaceful. There had been no grand promises, no dramatic words, no attempt to impress anyone. You simply listened. You spoke with sincerity. You treated every person with the same respect, whether anyone noticed or not. At the time, he smiled, appreciated the moment, and moved on. Only now did he realize that something far more meaningful had happened. That quiet exchange had become the standard by which he unconsciously measured every connection afterward. Stay till the end. Because this realization changed the way he looked at the past. He began to understand that while other memories had slowly faded, yours had remained untouched. Not because they were louder, but because they carried peace. Every time life became uncertain, his thoughts naturally drifted back to those calm moments. They reminded him that genuine comfort is rare, and once it is found, the heart remembers it long after the mind stops searching. The person who had once questioned him noticed this change as well. There was no longer any frustration in the conversations. Instead, there was quiet observation. It became impossible to ignore how naturally your name appeared whenever he spoke about trust, kindness, or hope. No one had encouraged him to do that. It simply happened because some people become part of the way we understand what truly matters. Perhaps you have wondered whether simple acts really leave lasting impressions. Maybe you have thought that only remarkable moments are remembered. But life often works in the opposite way. The smallest gestures, a thoughtful word, a patient response, a quiet smile offered without expectation, can become the moment someone treasures most. They are easy to overlook while they happen, yet impossible to replace once they are gone. Don't skip, because the next conversation uncovered something even deeper. Later that evening, someone gently asked him, "When did you first realize they were different?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, He smiled as though revisiting a memory that had quietly stayed with him for a very long time. "I don't think there was one single moment," he said softly. "It happened little by little. Every conversation added another reason to respect them. Every memory made the next one easier to hold on to. One day I simply noticed that whenever I imagined honesty, kindness, and peace, I always thought of the same person." The room fell silent. No one had expected such a simple answer to carry so much meaning. For the first time, everyone understood that yesterday's disagreement had never been about convincing anyone. It had only revealed what had already been quietly growing for a long time. As the evening drew to a close, someone noticed him looking thoughtfully at an old photograph resting nearby. He didn't pick it up. He didn't explain why it had captured his attention. He simply smiled with quiet gratitude before looking away. No one asked what memory had just crossed his mind. But that photograph held the final piece of a story he had never shared with anyone. And when its meaning is finally revealed, every unanswered question from the beginning will come together in a way no one could have anticipated. Sometimes the smallest object can hold the largest story. That old photograph remained in his thoughts long after everyone else had forgotten about it. It was not valuable because of what it showed. It was valuable because of what it reminded him to feel. As he looked at it again later that evening, he wasn't searching for the past. He was recognizing how quietly the past had shaped the present. The picture captured an ordinary day. Nothing remarkable seemed to be happening. No celebration. No unforgettable event. Just a simple moment shared between familiar faces. Yet whenever his eyes rested on that image, one detail always drew his attention: you. Not because you were standing at the center, but because of the calm expression you carried. While everyone else appeared focused on the occasion, you seemed focused on the people around you. Something important is waiting for you, because this memory answered a question he had never been able to explain. He finally understood why your name always brought him a sense of peace. It wasn't only about what you had said over the years. It wasn't only about the conversations you shared. It was the consistency. The quiet way you remained yourself no matter who was watching. The kindness that never seemed to depend on recognition. The patience that appeared naturally instead of being performed. Those qualities had become part of the memories he trusted most. As he reflected on that photograph, another realization settled gently into his heart. People often spend so much time searching for extraordinary signs that they overlook the beauty of quiet reliability. Yet those steady qualities are the ones that remain when excitement fades. They become the foundation of respect, admiration, and lasting connection. Don't skip, because the next conversation unfolded in the most unexpected way. A close friend noticed him holding the photograph and smiled. "I've seen you look at that picture before," the friend said. "Every time you do, you become unusually quiet." He nodded. "Because every time I see it, I remember something I almost forgot." "What is that?" He looked at the picture one more time before answering. "I remember how easy it felt to be myself around them." Those words lingered in the air. No one rushed to fill the silence. Everyone understood that being accepted without pretending is one of life's rarest gifts. His friend thought for a moment before asking another question. "So, if you had never met them, do you think you would have become the same person you are today?" The question caught him completely by surprise. He didn't answer quickly. Instead, he reflected carefully, almost as if he were discovering the answer while speaking. "I honestly don't think so." The response was gentle. Not dramatic. Simply honest. They reminded me that kindness isn't weakness. That listening matters. That peaceful people can change a room without raising their voices. I carried those lessons with me even when I didn't realize I was carrying them. Perhaps you needed to hear that today. You may never fully know how your quiet actions ripple through another person's life. A thoughtful conversation, a patient response, or a moment of genuine understanding can become part of someone's story in ways they only recognize years later. As the conversation came to an end, his friend smiled knowingly and said, "Then maybe yesterday's disagreement wasn't the real story." He looked up with quiet curiosity. "No," his friend continued. "The real story is that no matter how many conversations have happened since then, one truth has never changed." He didn't ask what that truth was. Somehow, he already knew. Yet there was still one final conversation waiting to happen. One that would bring together every quiet realization, every remembered moment, and every unspoken feeling into a single message that had been waiting, patiently, from the very beginning. The evening arrived with a gentleness that seemed almost intentional, as though the world itself had slowed down to make room for one conversation that could no longer be postponed. There was no dramatic setting, no carefully planned moment. Just two people sitting in comfortable silence, allowing the weight of recent days to settle without rushing to explain it. Sometimes the most important words arrive only after enough quiet has made them impossible to avoid. He took a slow breath before speaking. "You asked me the other day why I kept defending them." His friend nodded. "I've been thinking about your answer ever since." He smiled softly, not because he had found something new to say, but because he had finally found the simplest way to say it. "I wasn't defending them." The words hung in the air. "I was protecting the truth I already knew. Something important is waiting for you," because those few words changed the entire meaning of everything that had happened before. Yesterday's disagreement had never been about proving someone wrong. It had quietly revealed what was already settled within his heart. When people questioned your character, he didn't search for arguments. He searched for memories. And every memory answered the question before he ever needed to speak. He remembered your patience during difficult conversations. He remembered your habit of encouraging others without expecting anything in return. He remembered the way you could bring calm into situations that felt uncertain. None of those memories were extraordinary on their own. Together, they became impossible to ignore. His friend listened carefully before asking one final question. "So if someone asked you today what makes them different, what would you say?" He looked toward the fading light outside the window, thoughtful but completely at peace. "I would tell them that some people leave you impressed." He paused. "And some people leave you better." The room became wonderfully still. There was no need for anyone to add another opinion. Sometimes a quiet truth completes a conversation more completely than 100 explanations ever could. Perhaps this is the realization your own heart has been waiting for. Real influence is rarely measured by applause or attention. It is measured by the quiet changes people carry with them long after the moment has passed. You may never hear every kind word spoken about you. You may never witness every conversation where your name brings comfort instead of confusion. Yet that does not make those moments any less real. Don't skip, because one final discovery was about to connect every piece of the story. Later that night, as everyone prepared to leave, his phone lit up with a short message from the very person who had disagreed with him days before. It wasn't long. It wasn't dramatic. It simply read: "I've been thinking about everything that was said. I understand now why you spoke the way you did. Some people earn respect without asking for it. I see that now." He read the message twice. Not with pride. With gratitude. Because understanding had quietly replaced misunderstanding. As he slipped the phone back into his pocket, he smiled to himself. The argument that once seemed so important had become only a small chapter. What remained was something far more lasting, a shared recognition that authenticity, kindness, and quiet consistency always speak louder than appearances. And just as he began to walk away, another thought crossed his mind, one gentle realization he had never spoken aloud to anyone. It wasn't about yesterday. It wasn't even about the conversation. It was about what he hoped might happen the very next time your paths crossed. That hope, quietly protected until now, was ready to become the beginning of an entirely new chapter. A new chapter never begins with a loud announcement. More often, it starts with a quiet decision that only one heart knows has been made. As he walked home beneath the fading evening sky, the conversations of the past few days no longer felt heavy. They had transformed into something gentler, a reminder that truth has a remarkable way of finding its place without needing to compete for attention. For the first time in a long while, he stopped imagining what everyone else might think. Instead, he focused on one simple question. If another opportunity appears, will I recognize it? The answer came almost immediately. Yes. Not because he could predict the future. Not because everything was certain. But because he finally understood what truly mattered. Something important is waiting for you, because this quiet realization led to an unexpected moment the very next day. He was having an ordinary conversation when someone mentioned your name in passing. There was no special reason for it. No emotional story. Just a brief reference that could have easily been forgotten. Yet something changed. Instead of simply listening, he smiled with quiet appreciation. One of the people nearby noticed. "You always react differently when they come up," they said with a curious smile. He laughed softly. "I suppose I do." "Why?" He paused, not searching for words this time, but choosing them carefully. "Because they remind me that the best people don't try to be unforgettable. They simply are." The sentence settled gently into the conversation. No one challenged it. No one questioned it. Instead, everyone seemed to reflect on someone who had quietly made their own lives better. Perhaps that is the kind of impact we rarely recognize while we are living it. The moments that shape another person's heart are often the moments we ourselves consider ordinary. A kind greeting. A thoughtful reply. A willingness to listen without interrupting. Those simple choices become lasting memories because they are sincere. Don't skip, because the next discovery brought everything even closer together. Later that afternoon, someone who had been present during the original disagreement admitted something unexpected. "I wasn't really upset because of what you said." He looked surprised. "Then why were you?" The answer came with complete honesty. "I realized I could never make you speak about anyone else the way you speak about them." Silence followed. Not an uncomfortable silence. A peaceful one. It was the kind of silence that arrives when everyone suddenly understands the truth at the same time. He nodded gently. I never intended to compare anyone. I know, came the reply. That's exactly why your words felt so genuine. In that moment, yesterday's disagreement finally found its ending. There was no winner. There was no loser. There was only greater understanding. As everyone prepared to leave, one final thought remained with him. He wondered what would happen if you ever discovered these conversations, not to impress you, not to seek recognition, but simply so you would know how deeply your quiet character had been appreciated when you weren't even present. He smiled at the thought. Some stories don't need perfect timing. They only need honest hearts. And somewhere, without either of you realizing it yet, the distance between two separate journeys had already begun to grow a little smaller, preparing for a moment neither of you would see coming until it arrived. The most beautiful changes often happen so gradually that no one notices them until they look back and realize how far they have come. The days continued as usual, yet something within him had become lighter. The conversations that once echoed with questions had been replaced by quiet confidence. He no longer felt the need to explain what he appreciated about you. He simply carried that appreciation with him, allowing it to shape the way he saw the future. One afternoon, while sitting with a few familiar faces, someone unexpectedly brought up a simple question. What do you admire most about them? The group grew quiet. Everyone expected a quick answer. Instead, he took a thoughtful pause. Not because the answer was difficult, but because there were too many honest reasons to choose from. Something important is waiting for you, because what he said next surprised everyone listening. I admire the way they make people feel. No one spoke. He continued gently. They don't have to be the loudest person in the room. They don't need everyone looking at them. Somehow, after spending time with them, people walk away feeling calmer, more hopeful, more understood. Those words settled into every heart around him. One friend smiled knowingly. I've noticed that too. Another nodded. It's rare. For the first time, the conversation wasn't centered on opinions or assumptions. It became a conversation about gratitude. About the quiet influence one person can have without ever realizing it. Perhaps this message has found you because you sometimes underestimate the quiet gifts you carry. We often believe our biggest impact comes from extraordinary moments. Yet life has a gentle way of proving otherwise. The encouraging words you almost forgot saying, the patience you offered when no one expected it, the kindness you showed without asking for recognition, these become lasting memories in someone else's heart. Don't skip, because the next moment revealed something beautifully unexpected. As everyone prepared to leave, one friend stopped him. There was something I never told you. He turned with quiet curiosity. I watched that conversation the other day very carefully. And? I realized you weren't trying to convince anyone. He smiled. No. You were simply speaking from experience. Those words felt different. They carried understanding instead of speculation. The friend continued. When someone speaks with that much peace, it's usually because they've seen enough to trust what they're saying. He looked down for a moment, reflecting. Maybe that's true. But there's one thing I still don't understand. What is it? The friend asked softly. If you respect them this much, what do you hope happens next? For a moment, he said nothing. The breeze moved quietly through the trees. The afternoon seemed to slow. Then he answered with complete sincerity. I don't hope for anything complicated. I simply hope that one day they truly understand how valuable they already are. Not because they need praise. Not because they need recognition. But because people who quietly bring light into other lives often forget that they carry that same light within themselves. Those words remained in the air long after the conversation ended. As he walked away, he felt an unfamiliar sense of peace. He didn't know when your paths might cross again. He didn't know what words would eventually be spoken. But for the first time, he wasn't focused on unanswered questions. He was quietly looking forward to the possibility of a conversation that would need no explanations at all, because everything important would already be understood the moment your eyes met once again.